I'm fine.
Okay, we're ready.
Do I use this to start the meeting? Or just to end it?
I think just, and
To end it,
Or
right?
you can just do it, yeah.
Anytime
Or
it's
any-
necessary.
Anytime it's necessary.
For
but Frank and
order.
I get out of order.
that's right. Yeah.
You can start.
Place your hand on the counter. The shit.
I got my papers ready. Can give it to you once. All right, I think, are we ready, Carolyn?
Yes,
Got everything online ready? It is. Check official.
December 18th.
101. I'm calling the December 18th, 2023 meeting of the Albemarle County Architectural Review Board to order. Will staff please call the roll?
Yes. Mr. Stoner,
Here.
Mr. Vanderwerf,
Here.
Mr. Hancock,
Here.
Mr. Vanderwerf. No, I'm sorry, Mr. Henningsen and Mr. Matsuno are absent.
Thank you. We'll start with announcements. Today's meeting is a hybrid meeting. The public may access and participate in the meeting electronically. Instructions for doing so are posted on the Albemarle County website at the Albemarle County calendar. The public has real-time audio-visual access to this meeting over Zoom and real-time audio access over telephone, both as provided in the lawfully posted meeting notice. This meeting is being recorded and will be made available on the county's website. This meeting is a public record and subject to disclosure under the Freedom of Information Act. All speakers, when it is your turn to speak, please first state your name for the record. Applicants who are making presentations, note that your presentation is limited to a total of 15 minutes, which you can divide among your team members. Staff will let us know when the 15 minutes are up. If applicants in the meeting room have team members attending virtually who will need to present, please make that known when you come to the podium. Everyone who is participating virtually, please mute your microphone until it is your turn to speak. Disclosures. Do any ARB members have anything to disclose?
I will need to recuse myself from item 6, the Flow Hyundai initial plan.
Okay, thank you. Dade?
No disclosures.
And I do not have anything to disclose either. Moving on to public comment. Are there any members of the public that want to make a comment about a project that is not on the agenda for review? Nobody?
Nobody
online?
online either.
Okay. Moving to the consent agenda. There's one consent agenda item today. It is ARB 2023-100 Glenbrook at Foothills Phase 4 initial plan. Does any ARB member want to move the Glenbrook application off the consent agenda for discussion?
No.
I don't either. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
A second?
Carolyn, could you call the vote, please?
Yes. Mr. Hancock,
Aye.
Mr. Stoner,
Aye.
Mr. Vanderwerf.
Aye.
Thank you.
Moving on to regular review items. There is one regular review item today. It is ARB 2023 -101. Flow Hyundai initial plan and preliminary architecture. And Mr. Stoner will recuse himself. Chris, are you ready with your presentation?
Yes.
Okay.
Second. The application being reviewed today is initial site plan to establish a Hyundai auto dealership with associated site improvements.
We're not hearing you.
Is it too far? The site is located along Route 29 and is bounded by Berkmar Drive to the west and two automotive dealerships to the north and south. ARB reviewed an initial site plan for a different development in February of this year and did not recommend approval. A special use permit is required for the outdoor storage display and sale use, but application has not been submitted yet. Once submitted, it will be scheduled for review. There are a few issues with the site plan submitted. The depth of the planting area along the frontage, shallow planting area along the perimeters of the site, and the distribution of the interior parking area trees. The depth of the planting area along the Route 29 frontage is inconsistent, ranging from 43 feet to 13 feet. Existing utilities in a 10-foot shared use path that is recommended by county transportation staff along the frontage further limits the planting area. Regarding the perimeter parking area landscaping, shallow planting strips with shrubs are shown along the northern and southern perimeters of the site. These shallow planting strips do not allow for the required large trees. Wider planting areas along the frontage and perimeters of the site will be needed to avoid conflicts with and allow for the required landscaping to mitigate the impacts of paved areas. Regarding interior parking area landscaping, the site plan notes a different number of spaces than what's shown on the plan. Also, interior trees are mostly distributed throughout the western portion of the site, away from the entrance corridor. Regarding the building architecture, the proposed design of the showroom is contemporary and not reflective of the traditional architecture of the area. The primary forms of the building are a tall fascia with a deep overhang floating above a glass box. The tall fascia results in a top-heavy appearance and non-traditional proportions. Revising the design to reduce the top-heavy appearance and incorporating more traditional elements and proportions would be appropriate. Because of site-related issues that have been detailed in the staff report, we are not recommending approval of the initial site plan at this time. I'd be happy to answer any questions you all may have.
Thanks, Chris. Dade, do you have any questions for Chris?
I don't believe so. Thank you for your report.
I don't either. Well, maybe one question. We're not reviewing preliminary architecture for the building that fronts Berkmar or the car wash building, right? It's
Right,
just the,
we don't believe, our staff doesn't believe those buildings would be visible from 29.
okay. I do remember seeing that in the staff report. Thank you.
And Berkmar is not an EC at that location. Correct. Okay.
All right, we're ready for the applicant's presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kevin Schaefer. I am the Charlottesville Studio Director for Design Develop Architects. I have with me in the audience today, Justin Schemp with Schemp Engineering. Thank you, Chris, for the thorough staff report. As always, it's helpful to have the dialogue with county staff. Before we get into the discussion on the building, I'd like to just note that we're very early in these stages. We're hoping to have a dialogue, have a discussion with the board as we work through this process. We'll certainly be bringing a more formal presentation in terms of a landscape plan and a lighting plan at subsequent submissions. But our goal here today was to engage the board and county staff with the proposal to gather feedback, review some of our assumptions, and understand if they align with the board's expectations. To talk about process for just a minute and to look at the bigger picture outside of the entrance corridor. Recently, Flow Automotive has purchased several dealerships around the Charlottesville and Elmore County area. This change in ownership prompts facility review from national brand representatives, and in some cases requires new facilities to be constructed or existing facilities to be updated. In this case, at Hyundai, the existing location of the facility was problematic for two primary reasons. First, the existing showroom is undersized for its market, and it serves and it leans heavily on the shared resources of the Jim Price Auto Group, including the service bays in the rear of that site. And now secondly, that facility is on a parcel not owned by Flow. So for these reasons, that's prompting the proposal that's in front of you now. And to continue to talk about the process, it's been stressed to us by Flow that Flow Automotive aims to be a good neighbor and a steward of the entrance corridor guidelines. However, certain brands are more conducive to alteration and customization based on the governing jurisdiction, and certain brands are more rigid in their national requirements. Staff has correctly noted in their report that the proposed design for the showroom building adapts the standard Hyundai design to the site. But in engaging the board early here, we're anticipating an ongoing internal discussion with Hyundai national brand representatives to occur. We still believe the project satisfies the requirements of the entrance corridor guidelines and the project is appropriate, specifically once we start to accommodate some of the staff's recommendations in our next submission. But we'll get to that a little bit later in this presentation. As I mentioned, Flow Automotive has invested heavily in Charlottesville and Albemarle County along the entrance corridor and will be committed to ensuring that their projects are high quality, they'll be well executed, and they'll be contextually appropriate projects that add economic value and provide important services to the residents of this area. Flow's already shown this commitment at the Mazda, Volkswagen, Porsche, Audi campus located on Route 250, and they aim to continue that precedent that they've established. When looking at the Albemarle County entrance corridors, there are two automotive vehicular centric corridors in Albemarle County, and this project is appropriately located on a parcel in the heart of one of those corridors. The stretch of Route 29 contains 6 other automotive dealerships, as well as automotive service and repair centers, car washes, and refueling stations. Recently, several dealerships along the stretch of Route 29, including Malloy Ford and Flow Subaru, have gone through renovations and expansions in order to modernize and refresh their facilities. And these facilities contribute to the livelihood and the vitality of these entrance corridors. This proposal aims to continue these improvements by building off the high quality, well-executed precedents that have been set recently. As staff mentioned, by setting the building so far back, we have limited the visual impact of both the front and the side elevations. We're tucking the associated service area behind the building in an effort to de-emphasize the more utilitarian uses and to elevate the client-facing public areas of the project. The smaller rectangular forms on the north and south sides of the showroom mass will help shield the side elevations from the entrance corridors. And as staff also noted in the report, the existing structures of the Jim Price Auto Group's campus will continue to shield and screen the north elevation, limiting visibility significantly from any southbound travelers on Route 29. In general, staff's comments and their recommendations align with Flow's strategy, which is to set the building back further away from the entrance corridor. And staff has suggested utilizing enhanced landscaping screening to minimize the visual appearance of the building. Despite large shade trees being kind of the arch nemesis of new cars for a variety of reasons, Flow Automotive can understand the staff's recommendations and will take steps to incorporate these suggestions into the next submission by increasing the depth of planting along the entrance corridor and finding ways to introduce more trees of larger varieties along the perimeter. At this point, I'd like to introduce Justin Schimpf to review some of staff's comments and recommendations regarding the site design, the special use permit process, and the proposed landscaping.
Good afternoon, everyone. Justin Schimpf, and the engineer for the project. We worked with Flow. We worked on the Pantop site, the Volkswagen Audi. It turned out very lovely. One of the things that I hear from folks who look at these plans often is like, wow, it's so much parking. Well, they need it. If you go over there, you will find not an empty parking space, and that's got 400 and some odd parking spaces. So these are very parking heavy use, and it's very important for us to have the parking in the front, to have the parking function for the users, or both folks who are getting their vehicle serviced and folks who want to buy new or used vehicles. I think the main points of challenge for us in the layout are not really the front landscaping strip. And Kevin, excuse me, do you have a screen of the site layout here? Maybe we could go back to the site sketches that Chris had. I can show you the conflict points here. Chris, in your presentation, well, yes, here, basically the areas, there's 2 comments about sort of a lack of large shade trees on either side of the site. And one thing I want to point out, if you look at the I guess it's page south side here, which I guess is the roughly south, Malloy Ford building there comes up pretty close, 5, 8 feet off the property line. So in that location, trees would be essentially in the shadow of that building. That service building is 20 feet tall. We can measure that and report to you all next time, but we do wonder a little bit about the benefit of trees in that particular location. There's a challenge to us of getting them in there. We're very constrained side to side here. The property is between two existing uses. There's no adjustments possible, and there's a certain minimum width to get the service bays required, which you see the 16 service bays there is the minimum number to achieve our service goals. And we also have the bump out for the service drop off, which effectively screens that area, but adds the overall width. And so we're space constrained side to side. And I wondered on the front, if you'll look at the front corner of the parking lot in front of the Malloy Ford building, I looked at my drawings and I was able to curve that parking lot in, so we make room for 3 trees in that zone. But it's more challenging to get them back behind the Malloy building. And so I wondered if the board could opine about the need for those trees, or if they could be clustered somewhere else, potentially. Similarly, we have a situation on the north side. There's an easement up there, a water line easement for an RWSA water line easement that we can't plant any trees in. So to create a landscape buffer there on that side, we have to move those parking spaces over 15 feet, something like that, which is kind of it's not workable for us. And so similarly, the question of adjacent to those, would the board be open to maybe a consolidation instead of every 40 feet, every 80 feet, clustering a couple trees onto an island, any kind of flexibility. And we realize that we're going to make a resubmittal of this. The plan is not the point when you all will vote on it today. This has a special use permit process that has to go through still. So our intention is to take these comments, hear any feedback you have, and then resubmit, which could then be an action taken prior to going forward with a planning commission meeting, a special use permit. So this is not something we need to solve today, but I just point out to the board of the issues in front of us. I think we have the flexibility back in front to increase the landscape in the front. But given our circumstances being such a wedged in between 2 existing car dealerships, we wonder if there could be a little bit of accommodation of flexibility on the tree planting on the sides, basically. Otherwise, I don't think we'll have a problem addressing the, most of the comments presented by the staff in the report.
Thank you, Justin. So with all that in mind on the site, I'll have a few more comments just to, for the board to weigh in regarding the architectural design. Staff mentioned specifically to reduce the top-heavy appearance of the fascia flow, and we agree that that's a valid comment. So thank you, staff, for making that comment. And we are committed to reducing the extent of that overhang in an effort to reduce the top-heavy appearance for our next mission. I would iterate, looking at the project holistically and in the context of the recent automotive showroom precedents, we're satisfying key entrance corridor guideline requirements in several ways. The scale, building form, and material palette of the modern automotive dealership typology is represented frequently along this section of Route 29, and it's well represented here as well. Metal panel, commercially scaled storefront, unique entry components are common in this building type. Unlike the adjacent Mount Malloy Ford, this project utilizes a warm earth tones material palette to reduce the reflectivity and relate more to its adjacent context, utilizing high quality, long lasting, low maintenance materials. The project would feel neither out of scale nor incompatible with its context for someone traveling down Route 29. Consistent unifying materials and a legible building form help create a cohesive whole. The sky pattern on the ACM panel will give the facade texture and limit blankness. The introduction of an ACM front entry element helps break down the curtain wall showroom while introducing an element of human scale and facilitating the pedestrian's interaction with the proposed project. The large amount of transparent glazing will meet the VLT and VLR requirements of the guidelines and will engage the showroom with the site, creating a dynamic experience for those traveling along Route 29. The more technical side of things, all mechanical units will be screened appropriately by a proposed parapet wall. As Justin mentioned, all landscaping will meet the guideline requirements, as you guys see fit and allow once, we think about some of the questions regarding those setbacks. All site lighting will meet county standards, and all signage will be submitted under a separate application, but will meet county standards. So these strategies, in conjunction with staff's recommendation to screen the project within some enhanced landscaping and some of the revisions that Justin talked about today, will make this undeveloped lot appropriate and compliant with the entrance corridor guidelines while providing a value-added service for our area. We're hoping the board agrees with this assessment, and if not, we'll help provide specific comments for us to work on and convey to Hyundai. So we appreciate the dialogue, and we hope we've conveyed the process ahead. Thank you for your time, and we're here to answer any questions you may have for this.
Thank you. Dade, questions for the applicant?
Thank you. No, I appreciate your presentation.
And I don't have any questions either. Thank you for your presentation. Are there any members of the public that wish to comment online or in person? The ARB will now go into discussion. Dade, that's you and me.
You sure? Yeah, thank you, Frank. And actually, I realized I had a couple questions come up for me for staff, probably, if I could ask those. I guess, Chris, I was interested to ask, could you summarize for us again how many more interior or perimeter trees would be required by the guidelines?
Interior is hard to determine right now because the parking count numbers appear to be off
Okay.
from what the numbers they're showing compared to what they're showing on the plan. Perimeter or the 40-foot on center along the perimeter of the site closest to the entrance corridor. So we hadn't determined how many trees but that'd be the kind of standard, the foot of large trees, 40-foot on center.
Okay, thank you. And then the second question I had is there any county regulation for the number of spaces for display, or that's separate from parking requirements by use, and it's really the applicant's judgment for what they?
Believe it's based on square foot, amount of square footage based on county code. So X amount of spaces based on square footage of display area.
Okay, so it's a function of.
Yeah.
Okay, display. Thank you. Well, I appreciate very much the applicant's presentation, appreciate staff's comments. I think I agree with staff's comments about the architecture. I appreciate that the applicant is willing to consider, especially the top heaviness and the scale of the fascia. I think, well, we're not really, this is not an architectural review. It sounded like the applicant wanted some discussion about the architecture. I do feel like the trademark design is maybe especially detached from the architecture of our area. I feel like the precedent set at the other flow property on Pantops that was mentioned are more grounded quite literally. I think one of the fundamental challenges of this corporate design is that it has literally no attachment to the earth in terms of the architecture and the massing. It's just sort of the free floating fascia. So I feel like thinking about some way to probably ground the building would be worth considering. And then secondarily, I don't understand the massing of the parapet and how it's carved, but yet not in a way that is explored fully. So that might be another avenue, is to explore it as a carved aluminum object, but one that maybe more fully investigates that. So quite apart from the review, but offered in that spirit. And I think in my recollection of the adjacent Malloy property, as I recall, there are a number of island locations for trees in that lot. And so I think that to me seems like a successful application of the guidelines, and maybe would suggest looking at that as a precedent for ways to incorporate additional trees in the site. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Agreed. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation and your submission package. Very legible. I would say, starting with the site, I think for me, what's important is the frontage landscaping. So it's good to know that you are looking for ways to meet staff's comment there and provide that increased planting area. I think the perimeter landscaping will, like, I don't know how much adding trees along those perimeters will have an impact on the entrance corridor and how you experience this site and this building. Along those lines, you know, thinking about that expanded, maybe it's those islands right at the front, you know, on either end of the perimeter that you lose a couple spaces and that gets beefed up. And like you said, it's not every 40 feet. But, you know, I think that's an option. I think, as you mentioned, Dade, that maybe adding islands, something we've seen before and could be a way to get the numbers you need for perimeter landscaping. And I agree with the comments on the architecture. I think there were a couple ideas in the precedent image of like national examples where I think one had some columns on one end and there was one that showed kind of a grill element or a louver element down below the fascia. That those two things I felt like minimize the impact of that heavy fascia. But we don't need to give solutions here. I think you've expressed a willingness to modify that and work to satisfy staff's comments. So I think anything here today too is preliminary architecture. So it's just maybe some guidance. I don't know if you have any other questions you'd like opinions from us on, or.
Thank you, guys. Now, maybe I downplayed the preliminary approach, maybe a little too much. What could be helpful when we have conversations with Hyundai is kind of some of the specific things that you're starting to address, like grounding the building. You know, Albemarle County wants to see grounding the building, looking at columns on one end. Would it be possible to bring that slide up? So maybe if you would be willing to tease out a few more comments on the architecture, that will help us facilitate the discussion internally. But I think the staff comment regarding the fascia is, you know, one that makes sense to Flo, one that we can start to address. And then, yeah, here, if things start to feel more appropriate, more, you know, contextual, I really do appreciate the, you know, the grounding the building comment as sort of the quite literal, here's how it was successful on Pantops. Maybe we can look at some of these and start to tease out ideas or opportunities that do fit within the Hyundai brand. And as you can see here, you know, there's flexibility within that fascia element to start to reduce it. They have Hyundai has very specific proportions on the step down and things like that. But we do acknowledge we need to be respectful of Albemarle County guidelines. And so I'm not asking you necessarily to design the building with me, but if there's anything that you can continue to comment on the building, we'd welcome it at this point.
Do you want to start, Frank?
Yeah, I mean, I think the step down is what's kind of making it off kilter and unbalanced and giving that heaviness. So the images I was looking at here, bottom left and the center image, I thought were two elements that maybe could help mitigate that. I don't see, here, if there's anything in these that's grounding the building, that just might be the design of like having that glass to the ground, but.
Yeah, I think the bottom right, it looks like the building is sort of, you know, it's a metal rectangular solid that's carved away to the glass. And I think that's sort of a clear example of one way to ground the building as a solid. There's a hint of it in the lower left where the fascia sort of returns down by the column. I do think, yeah, the step down in the fascia is an odd element. And so the ones where it's, more continuous datum, I think are ones that relate maybe more to the order of architecture in our county. I agree with Frank. I think that the screening, the solar screening on the central element is a good way to break down the scale and add some texture and depth. I think some of these also, like the depth of the fascia between the plane of it and the plane of the glass is an important element. I think the ones that are shallower in some of these views are maybe more effective and also reduce the top heaviness.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think if you compare the top two images, the image on the right feels a little better than the image on the left. And I think that the design we're reviewing is more in line with what's on the left.
I like the idea of this, this box, a very legible box that gets eroded away, but it's still, maybe it still connects on the side to
Yeah.
what you're saying. And you're right, it is very helpful to see that on the bottom right side. Eroding away a corner is a lot different than the floating,
Right.
overhang. So this is really helpful. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for bringing these examples.
If there's, again, if there's anything else that maybe comes to mind or any comments, that we're happy to engage in the discussion. I think these are all still very brand appropriate. And so exploring these opportunities will be helpful for us. So
I guess one quick thing to offer. I think some other projects have, one of the ways they've evolved the national design model is by subtle changes in the material. And I think there've been some precedents where, and it actually looks like the lower right corner. I can't tell if that's metal all the way down, but combining metal and masonry or metal and stone are also ways to ground.
introducing a separate material other than the ACM.
As an alternative for consideration that's been used elsewhere.
Okay. This is sort of the idea of a heavy masonry base and then maybe a change in material as you go vertical. Is that what?
Yes, yeah, that's certainly an example that we've seen and relates to traditional ways of building in the county.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. guys
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Yeah.
Any other comments?
No, but I
Okay.
appreciate your emphasis on the frontage landscape and agree with your comments about sort of the priority there.
And I think given the Malloy building, like that's gonna have an impact on this site.
Yeah.
And so it's not like you're gonna drive down the corridor and get a full view of this. You're gonna get a glimpse.
Right.
But. Okay.
No motion required from us today? Or,
There would be still a motion on the initial site plan or recommendation to forward.
So that they can move to a final.
okay, thank you.
Will you bring it up or do we?
We had
Why
to switch
improvise?
because we don't have a long enough cord. Technical. Margaret usually brings an extender. We don't have Margaret and we don't have the extender. So this is rather long. There are the first couple and then the final site plan actually has 15 points. So just let me know how you would like me to scroll.
Well, why don't we start up top? Frank, did you have any comments from 1 through 4?
No.
No.
I guess the most important one would be, I guess, as Margaret always points out, is the our recommendation of, or I guess not recommending approval of this initial, and if you agree with that, and that ultimately would result in the initial coming back to you all to see again,
Okay, so we'd have another initial with a,
right? If you
Revised site
would
plan.
want that.
I
process.
think, well, you go ahead.
You can go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
Or I guess I should say potentially, because it's always just a recommendation.
Right.
that the
Yeah,
site
it sounds
review
like
committee-
the applicant is going to make some changes to the site, and I think it would be useful to see that initially. To look at that again before approving, but defer to.
Agreed. Would we see it as a special use permit, or this is us seeing it?
It would need to also come back as, you would review it as the special use permit application as well.
Okay,
But that'd be separate of like the display outdoor storage. So, I mean, a lot of the issues are intertwined of landscaping, but if you wanted to review the initial again, in addition to whenever the special use permit application submitted.
I'm wondering if we see it next as a special use permit and the changes are incorporated. Would it then need to come back to us as an initial site plan? Or at that point, would it be, staff could review it and we would see final site plan and continue to review architecture? I mean, I don't know, we need to answer that now.
Yeah, I mean,
but-
if there's an administrative way for us to do that, I don't know that there's a way for us to.
It seems like a lot for us to review it today for initial site plan, then review a special use permit that's focused on the site plan. Right?
Right, I
Isn't
just,
that focused on the outdoor display?
I just got a message from Margaret and she, just wanted to remind the board that the applicant will submit it. Hopefully the applicant will submit a special use permit concurrent with the revised initial plan.
so it would
Okay.
be one review for both,
Okay,
basically.
It could function concurrently, yes.
yeah, just trying to minimize.
Yeah.
For the applicant, how many times we're reviewing site plan at the initial stage.
Right.
Okay, that's helpful. Does that mean Margaret's watching? Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you.
Always watching.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm good with the top four. And I think I'm good with the rest. I just
Sorry, I still need to read them.
browse quickly.
Yes, yeah, those all look fine to me.
Okay. If we could scroll back to the top. Do we have a motion?
We'll move.
And I'll second. And Carolyn, could you please call the vote? Aye,
And Mr. Vanderwerf,
Aye.
thank you.
thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right, moving on to work sessions. There are 2 work sessions today. The first is on the design guidelines. Agenda for Fifth Street Extended. Mariah, when you're ready.
Mariah Gleason, Senior Planner. Thank you for your continued work on this project. Today we have a draft of Route 631 Old Lynchburg Road and Fifth Street for your review. This corridor is located between Hickory Street to the south and the city line at Morris Creek to the north and has 2 street names, Old Lynchburg, which is to the south, and Fifth Street, which starts at the intersection. If you can see my cursor, it starts here. So Old Lynchburg takes a left and goes up to the city, and then that is where it becomes Fifth Street. The corridor has 2 distinct characters separated by the I-64 interchange. Parcels south of the interstate are mostly zoned in a mix of residential districts, but also include mixed-use neighborhood model developments and a few commercially zoned properties, including the county office building. North of the interstate, parcels have highway commercial zoning. So we saw this as this corridor organized into two segments and the I-64 interchange acting as the transition point. So starting at the southern end of the corridor and working towards the center of the county, the first segment we called Oak Hill. This segment has a 4-lane divided highway with a grassy median, and the experiences of wooded buffers along the segment screening residential neighborhoods, and then around the old Lynchburg, Fifth Street intersections, tree-lined streets become more prominent where office parks and denser apartment complexes establish a more suburban character. There is a continuous pedestrian facility along most of the segment of this corridor, or most of this segment, consisting of a combination of sidewalks and recreation paths. This is the precedent image for the streets for the segment. We tried to include more recent developments in this image. So we have the Southwood development on the upper left-hand corner, and then the build out of what was previously reviewed as, I think it was the ABC development, and it's changed names since then, but that's kind of in that the middle image, and then middle right, excuse me. So moving on to the second segment, we named this Moore's Creek. In this area, the road narrows and development is more consistent with the suburban commercial character of the city of Charlottesville. The prominent development along this segment is Fifth Street Landing. So we included a compositional photo of that site as well as zoom-ins of each of the buildings. We did not include the old Christian Aid Mission building in these images, since we weren't quite sure what the future of that building may be. That is the end of the segment, so I'll scroll back to the beginning and we can start from there.
Thanks, Mariah. Start with questions for staff. Frank Stoner.
Can you go back to the slide, Mariah, that has yes. So characteristics to avoid, we've got unrelegated parking. The sense is though that most of what's in that quarter is unrelegated, existing, is that?
With the residential complexes, we are seeing relegated parking. ABC, I'm not quite sure of their site plan, if it was actually supposed to be 2 buildings that front the street and they've just started with the back building. The unrelegated parking is true of the county office building in some senses, but the county office building is almost located to the side of their site with parking to the side. Along the street, there is a rather large buffer of landscaping at that particular site. Is there a site that you had in mind that I
No, I worry on corridors where the practical implications of relegated parking become difficult in the long term, like 29, for example. It's likely that with the places 29 plan, more parking is going to end up being relegated toward 29. And so just, I think, establishing guidelines that realistically yield us a result that we're going to like, as opposed to just creating a mishmash.
I think the wooded and tree lining nature of the roadway in this area is pretty dominated. I think that kind of side, the peripheral is pretty well lined on both sides. Instead of maybe 29 South, where you have like the Greenwood Grocery and kind of some of these older commercial developments, which really kind of encourage that front parking area. I don't think there are those same developments in this area. The older developments are more single family homes that the parking is relegated to the side or back.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Frank. Thank you, Mariah. And I do think that the ABC site does have a number of other buildings that haven't been built that will go in front of the parking that's visible right now. Yeah, no, thank you as always. Great work, and the division and names make sense to me. It's funny. It's like there's almost no road around here that doesn't need to change names a couple times. Along its length. So no other comments from me. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it looks great. Just curious, or I think I know the answer, where Old Lynchburg starts as an entrance corridor. Is that just the change in road classification?
I believe so. I believe that's how it came in.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting with the development, with the ABC site so close to Fifth Street Station and the residential development around here, just thinking about how this corridor is gonna evolve.
It's interesting. It almost seems like there's this kind of place that's happening at that intersection, with that mix of public, commercial and office uses, if you will. They started with a storage unit, so it's kind of hard to tell which direction it will really take as it evolves.
Mhm.
Because you don't get to see many active uses as the first build. So as the other buildings come in, it will be interesting.
And are there any applications for the Christian Aid building? You mentioned it's further
Not that
developed.
I'm aware of. They continue to mow the grass.
I think, if that was initial, I think there's a UVA credit union, I believe.
Yeah, UVA Credit Union was going to move into it.
Yeah, I'm not sure where, I think initial site plan was reviewed by staff. I believe Margaret reviewed that one, and I'm not sure, it seems like the days are blending together, but I think that's been at least a few months ago now, or several months ago.
May I ask one other question? How many other segments remain for us to complete now? Could look at that next week.
I think it might be 2, but I don't recall. The ones that I'm thinking about are 29 South to Scottsville. And there might be another one hanging out. Oh, just 20 South.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments?
Mariah, what would the zoning allow majority of the commercial district here in terms of height? Is it for 4 stories max?
Highway commercial, I believe, goes up to 65 feet. Let me check.
Can you guys think of any other sort of guidance that could be provided other than
Parking.
relegated parking and landscape frontage? Like if you were building a project here, what?
I think
Like-
context helps. Remind me, did we have an image of the county office building? Or was there a comment on that?
We do not have the county office building,
How
but
visible
we can
is
add
that?
it.
Kind of
Well,
tucked.
it's pretty well landscaped.
Back,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if I remember, the ABC development was pretty dense and what, 3-story, 4-story buildings? I mean, they were office buildings, right?
Yeah.
I remember 2 of them were kind of like, the sides of them were fronting. And there was like some connection between them in the middle, like a courtyard, if I'm thinking of it right. But that's
Is it a
all.
conscious decision to exclude the county office building just because it's,
No, it wasn't, there wasn't a particular reason why. And commercially zoned properties can go up to, build up to a height of 65 feet.
Was the ABC development, that's neighborhood model?
Yes, part of it is, it came in, no, it is fully neighborhood model, excuse me. We can add an image of the county office building. It just isn't very visible because of the trees. We could get a winter shot.
Maybe okay to include the trees and just talk about it as a good, because I don't know, do the trees reflect EC guidelines for large canopy trees? Might be a good precedent of showing the landscape.
Yes.
It's
Mhm.
applied.
We have this image that shows kind of that rhythmic provision of large street trees and landscaping, but we can do more to kind of turn the lens and show that.
Yeah, even if, like Dave said, it features that and that's the precedent. Cause it's grown in pretty nicely and.
When was it completed? Does that reflect like 20 or more years of growth?
I don't know. It's pretty
Pretty
mature.
mature trees, yeah.
Any other questions or comments?
Did have a question for the board just about this particular set of images. I included zoom ins of each of the buildings that comprise or make up Fifth Street Landing. Do you all like the zoom in, or is there more information that we could add?
Is the only other site the Christian Aid site
Yes.
across the street? We reviewed that sign.
Yes, we did.
I remember that sign.
I think that building is going away.
Did we review initial site plan for that site recently?
It was related to the credit union reusing it and some changes to parking and drop off, I think. But yeah, so if it's going away, no need to include it. I think it's
Yeah.
fine to include these.
It's an interesting site, like access and like there's some landform features there that I think might be challenging to develop right at the frontage. If I'm remembering it correctly, I think there's like big grade change.
I think that's true.
Okay.
I guess from a character standpoint, do we feel like there's anything being this in the Moores Creek zone that couldn't be built?
Mr. Stoner, can you talk closer to the
Oh,
microphone?
sorry. Just wondering if there's anything in the Moores Creek zone that wouldn't be approved south of 64? Or submitted today?
So the commercial properties along the road are the county office building, which we probably wouldn't see redeveloping. And then the other commercial property is mostly wooded. It could potentially develop. That's the light pink, right where it's either 8 or 576 is. And then the other commercial property is behind behind ABC, and that's where Region 10 is currently located. So I think the one that has the most opportunity to develop would be the one that is surrounded by the county office building, and then both portions of the ABC development.
Yeah, and I guess there's no highway commercial south of 64, so wouldn't have any retail, presumably. Or limited retail, I guess in a C1 you could have,
Or a neighborhood model, maybe.
or neighborhood model. Does feel like it's becoming a place.
Mhm.
Good, I guess.
Yes. Thank you, Mariah.
Welcome.
Now we will move to the second work session. This is a continued discussion on the personal wireless service facilities ordinance.
I will be helping with that. So Margaret actually put together a couple of things, so I'm just gonna kind of slide it over to the screen and we can kind of go down it. So the discussion from our last meeting is contained in the action memo and minutes that were linked to today's agenda. At the meeting on the 4th, there was consensus among the ARB members that the discussion should continue on the 18th with the goal of forming a recommendation. So listed below that were the primary concerns.
Guessing everybody has read this. There's questions for staff? Dade?
I don't think so. I wanted to start first by thanking Margaret for summarizing the conversation and providing that. And I think she's pulled out, in my recollection, the primary points that I was thinking of. I guess, please, we'll go around.
Thank you. Frank?
Yeah, I don't have anything to add to that. I mean, I think the 3 discussion points are consistent with what we talked about last time.
I guess my question, and this might be a question for us, is we are forwarding a recommendation.
Yeah, I think,
Correct.
yeah, either that or we would be, I don't know what the format would, yeah, this would be, I guess, a recommendation or a comment from the ARB.
Or comment.
And I don't know whether we might want to work to formulate it today and then wait until our other 2 members are with us or forward as a draft. I'd be interested in your thoughts and also staff's thoughts. On the one hand, I'd love for whatever we do to have the weight and the consensus of the full board. But also want to be sure we're timely in terms of providing our input.
Great point.
What is the time requirement for a recommendation?
So typically comments like that are put into the paperwork that gets uploaded and sent to the board. It can also be added later. I have seen that done as well, but for the most part, it might, the earlier you can get kind of a formulated document together, the greater opportunity they have for reviewing it.
And I guess we would, this goes next to planning commission and then ultimately to the supervisors. So we would forward a recommendation or concerns and suggestions to each.
Do you know if that's correct? It's next headed to the planning commission?
Yes,
Do we know the date? Has it been put on an agenda?
I don't know, but I can look. And Margaret said that we can probably wait until next meeting, but it would be good to know if there's general consensus on each of the points. At this time, are there things that you would like to clarify, edit, remove?
Well, I welcome my colleagues' opinions. I guess I think these are good points. I don't know if Margaret might be able to give a try at formulating it into a, yeah, the list is good. I don't know if it would become anything different. I think a general statement, I think maybe this is a consensus statement, is that the board is concerned about the potential impact of the proposed regulations to the entrance corridors. This is a summary statement, and then I think the first maybe 3 points are good. I wasn't sure whether we want to foreground the need for ARB review. Again, well, maybe, sorry, thinking out loud here. If Margaret would like to give a, well, let's hear from folks about whether there's consensus or not, and then if Margaret would like to give another pass into a formal letter, we could all comment on that.
Maybe we just go through the list,
Sure.
share our thoughts. I agree with you. I'm not sure we'd want to make a final decision without the other two members being here, but.
Yeah.
In terms of the increase from 10 to 30 could cause negative visual impacts on the entrance corridors, I think there's probably agreement on that. I think it's very site specific. Greater clarity is needed when staff can deny an application based on visual impact. That's a tough one. Yeah. Sounds like we might have a comment from the public.
Sure.
Neil Williamson from the Free Enterprise Forum. I'd like to speak just to the larger issue. When you look at the entrance corridor and you think of one application, that I can clearly hear what you're saying. But the regulations that are being proposed reduce the number of towers. If you have fewer towers, you have less visual clutter. What was been told to the Planning Commission was that the increase in height would actually increase the propagation, something in the neighborhood of doubling it, so that you could have half as many towers. So I ask you, just in your conversations, to consider the aggregate, although you guys get to always look at the specific. The aggregate is fewer towers, fewer roads, fewer entrance corridors with boxes next to towers, less stuff. But it's taller and it works better. And the entrance corridors are where we need it the most for safety. But I just wanted to put that into the thought pattern. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
Point well taken.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the point as well. I think Mr. Fritz in his comments last week suggested that it wasn't certain what the outcome would be in terms of whether folks would co-locate. I do think in reality, it's a possibility. I don't know that the regulations are written now in a way that would necessarily determine that. And if a bunch of competitors wanted to use the existing sites and expand them, as the regulations are currently written, they could. But,
Do we have the same authority over Dominion with regard to electric power lines? I know we reviewed some power lines on 29 at one point, didn't we?
Yeah, they were going higher.
They were going
Back
higher.
into there,
And that was
the Rappahannock.
Rappahannock Electrical Cooperative.
Right.
Right.
They put them in green. I guess they wanted.
Correct. And I think
or
they
Did
ultimately.
they extend into Albemarle as well?
Yeah, and we didn't have anything to say about whether they were getting taller or not, I don't believe. We were able to review the planting, I think,
Yeah.
associated with them.
So we do not have authority over Dominion, is that correct?
I don't know. In site planning, if this were site planning, my response would be no. They're a state organization. But I don't know, but that would be my guess.
That one you're referencing, I think it was just, we're reviewing the landscaping.
The landscaping,
Right.
okay.
That aspect of it, not where the lines were going in and in itself. It's just out of landscaping, kind of a type of landscaping. I believe it was,
So
right?
they would have input because it's in their own easement, so they have to accept the changes within their easement.
I raise it because I think it's in the critical infrastructure sort of world, which I think cell towers are quickly becoming critical
Yes.
infrastructure. I have very mixed emotions because quite honestly, power lines are a much more intrusive, unpleasant, um, whatever infrastructure component than cell towers are. And I think about the cell tower on 64 in particular as you're coming up, if you're coming eastbound, before you get to 29 South, there's a one up on the mountain there that's rather prominent. And I must say, I mean, I've seen similar towers like that treated with, where they make them look like pine trees. We saw one yesterday in North Carolina that was, I mean, it had to be 100 and, it had to be 150 feet tall, and it had sort of pine branches or what,
Redwood.
yeah.
They also do the same thing with palm trees.
Do they?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's not very convincing, and in that sense, it almost draws more attention to it. So I don't know. To Neil's point, I think the ability to reduce the number of towers by increasing the height is somewhat appealing. Having said that, I feel like there probably should be some review, but I don't-
Oh, sorry.
yeah, sorry, again, I'm thinking aloud, which is
Well,
not a
I
good idea
started
most
off.
of the times, but.
So this is going to the PC in late February.
Okay, so if we reached a consensus January 2nd, that give them plenty of time to review it. Well, I agree, Frank, that it is difficult, the greater, to the second point here. Maybe if we rephrased it, and that's maybe the impetus to say that ARB review is still needed, which is that because of the unique nature of each site and the impacts on the potential impacts on the corridors and the subjective nature of, well, I guess we're objective, right? The subjective, the nature of evaluation.
Site specific.
The site-specific nature of evaluation, we recommend that ARB review of sites in ECs be retained. I think folks would like, we could acknowledge that there may be a long-term mitigation of the number of sites, but it's unclear if that will be the outcome, and so we want to
Agreed, even if I mean, to Neil's point, and there's less of them, but even if there's one, we still want to see it, I think, as Frank mentioned, there's
Right.
one cell tower can have an impact.
Right,
Yeah.
And these sites would not be that one, this would be that one with outriggers and multiple antennas and.
Yes,
But
but it also doesn't mean just because we're gonna see it, it's gonna be denied.
no, just means.
That's what makes it difficult, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do feel like we should allow for administrative review and approval. So that under the options,
Mhm.
I just feel like there are a number of these that probably are not that contentious.
Right. So then I guess I guess the question would be whether there's a consensus to require balloon tests or to do photo simulations, or that would support an administrative level review that there's not
Right, yeah.
an impact that's negative. Given what we just talked about and went through with photo illustrations.
Yeah. Oh, we can't rely on them,
Yeah.
but we asked for them.
Yeah. I don't know if there's emerging consensus about balloon tests or photo simulations or either.
Yeah. You have another comment?
Okay.
I think it makes sense to review all of this at the next meeting.
Okay.
Do you think it needs refinement ahead of that meeting, or are we?
Well, I think if there are things here like the three of us know should what we can't agree on or that we do. But I don't know if there's any filtering that we can, I think it's all.
Well,
Yeah,
could we all agree, yeah. What in here can we all agree on today? Just as, which would give, I guess, some guidance to Margaret as to.
We agree on the first. I think we agree on the second.
I think so. We just need to define what,
Doesn't
Yeah.
have to go one way or the other. We just need more
Yeah.
clarity.
just to define it, yeah.
I get that clarity has to come from us.
Well, there's the existing precedent with the existing regulation of skylit facilities not being allowed, meaning that they don't have any tree backdrop and they're basically visible against the sky. I don't know if that, in this case, that would be from the EC. So maybe that's just, I don't know if there are any other criteria that are regularly applied.
Chances are with an increase of 30 feet,
Yeah, they could
There-
be skylit.
you're gonna be skylit. Yeah.
And in terms of whether we want to make a recommendation for balloon test and photo simulation, because the thing is, if the facilities are 30 feet wide instead of 30 inches wide, the balloon can't really
Mm-mm.
portray that, and yet I don't know that any of us trusts a photo simulation without
Yeah,
some point to tie it to.
There's no right of condemnation for establishment of these sites, is there? These
No,
are all
and-
private.
Yeah, and I think all the folks that have them have, they're vested in what's there now, in most cases.
It's a little different than a public utility. It has the ability to condemn.
Mhm.
In this case, I guess the challenge is if the network needs a pole in a particular location and the only site they can get is visible. That a criteria for acceptance of it, even though it may be,
I think it would, that's an instance where like, we might say that visually there's not appropriate screening, but then the board or others would accept it because of public health and safety. And so there's a
okay.
process to get there. It's just, it's a couple
That
steps
case
that have
is
just been
being made.
mitigated.
that's not our job, I guess.
Right,
Gotcha.
right.
Okay. I mean, yeah.
And my understanding of this, I want to make sure I'm thinking about this correctly. These recommendations will ultimately go to the consultant that's drafting the policy. Or is the policy drafted and we're commenting on it and we need to,
Right, so there's a draft ordinance that's being considered by the planning commission, and if it is approved there, it would go to the board for approval and adoption. So basically, there's a draft ordinance that's out there that's moving forward.
Gotcha.
and If we're okay with that, that's fine. If we have concerns and revisions we think should be incorporated, this is our chance to influence that process. Doesn't mean that they will be adopted. It just means they'll be known by the planning commission and the
Mhm.
supervisors.
I mean, I don't think we can strike any of these
Okay.
now, do you?
I don't think we strike any. I think again. For some of these, I think we can answer the question. Should we not allow administrative review and approval in the ECs, or should we?
What would the criteria be would be an interesting question. Because there could be some that come to the board and some that are administrative. And so if that were true, where would the threshold be?
Date's point, I guess, let's say it was not skylit. Would that in and of itself be reason for administrative approval? To me, it would be. I don't, it's. And we're just talking about stuff that is within what, 700 feet of the entrance corridor?
I'm not sure of the
mean,
distance.
The other reality is a facility that's 30 feet higher than the tree line is gonna be visible way beyond the entrance corridor in terms of impacts. And that's not controllable. Correct?
Right, our purview is purely from the ECs.
Yeah. I mean, part of me wonders if we're just wasting our time. Quite honestly, to get too deep in the weeds on this, because again, it's infrastructure that we can't do without.
Well, it is needed. I guess I would hope we could put something on the record. I do think the existing ordinance and the actions of staff and the board over the last decades have done a remarkable job, at least in my opinion, of limiting the impacts of this technology visually on our corridors. And there are many places where they can still be enjoyed as pretty rural forestal spaces without them.
And I think it allows for public comment, which I think is a good thing. Is there another way that it's by right? You know, I don't think there's a public comment available, is there?
No, but I don't believe so.
For a by right development, there doesn't need to be a public comment. If it's not by right, it's legislative, and that usually comes with a public comment.
Well, good work on this today. So I guess, I don't know if Mariah or Margaret, if she's listening in, is there anything else that we should try to provide more clarity on today, or we could plan to return to it, hopefully with the full board on the second?
I think we could wait for the full board. If there aren't, well, I'm sorry, she's typing. Oh, wait. We're good for now.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. We'll move to other business. Approval of December 4th minutes. Is there a motion to adopt the December 4th, 2023 ARB minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Can we call the vote?
Yes. Mr. Stoner,
Aye.
Mr. Vanderwerf,
Aye.
Mr. Hancock.
Aye.
Thank you.
Any other items? Any board members or staff? No. Thank you. Next meeting. So our next ARB meeting is scheduled for January 2nd, 2023. I unfortunately will not be able to attend. But I feel like I've had the discussion on the personal wireless.
You're copping out.
That's right. I just made that decision. No, I'm kidding. I had a trip booked for a while.
Got to see the receipts. Yeah, but it's good.
Date, and you're looking to see if you'll be able to
I
attend.
think I'm around.
I should be here. Yep.
Actually.
With that, the meeting is adjourned. To the next meeting on January 2nd, 2023. It is 2:19.
Gavel drops.
2024.
The next
Oh
meeting
my
is
God.
2024. I'm like, I read the teleprompter and it said 2023.
Sorry.